This week in news surrounding Israel, I'm going to be talking about Esau and the Palestinians. So stay tuned for all the details. Well, shalom, everyone. Welcome once again to this week's newscast. I'm Robert Gottslig, your host. And once again, in a new poll conducted a couple of weeks ago by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, they revealed once again the hearts of the majority of the Palestinian people. Here are some of the highlights of that research. 73% of Gazans and 57% of West Bank Palestinians still think Hamas's decision to launch its offensive against Israel on October 7th was correct. 63% blame Israel for the current suffering of Gazans in the war, while 22% blame the U.S., 8% blame Hamas, and 4% blame the Palestinian Authority. 56% think Hamas will be in control of Gaza after the war, and 75% of Palestinians said they were satisfied with Hamas's performance in the current war. 65% oppose the idea of a two-state solution, and 63% supported a return to confrontations and armed intifada. Well, there you have it, right from their own sources. And yet the world, with little compassion for the Jewish people, pressures Israel to make peace with a people who have nothing more than a perpetual hatred for them. Well, I'll tell you, judgment time is coming one day. And that's what we read about in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, Obadiah, and Malachi, and it's concerning the Edomites. Now, some Bible scholars would say that the Edomites, Esau's descendants, have disappeared from the world scene and that there is zero trace of them today. Others would identify a very strong relation to today's modern-day Palestinians. In fact, the late Dr. Jimmy DeYoung even traced Esau's descendants through Amalek, Agag, Haman, Herod, then on through to Haj Amin al-Husseini, all the way up to Yasser Arafat, who was the originator of the modern-day Palestinian movement. Now, I haven't verified Dr. DeYoung's modern genealogy links, but what I do know for sure is that the spirit of the Edomites is alive and well to this day. Of course, we know that in Genesis chapter 36, Esau's name is changed to Edom. And we know that he settled in Mount Seir, which is in modern-day Jordan. And when we look at Ezekiel 35, the book of Obadiah, and Malachi in chapter 1, we read about judgment that's coming on Edom for their perpetual hatred for Israel. Let's just take a brief look for a moment at those chapters. In Ezekiel chapter 35, I'm reading from verse 3. God says, "Thus says the Lord God, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against you. I will stretch out my hand against you and make you most desolate. I will lay your cities waste, and you shall be desolate. Then you shall know that I am the Lord, because you have had an ancient hatred and have shed the blood of the children of Israel." Look at verse 7. "Thus I will make Mount Seir most desolate and cut it off from the one who leaves and the one who returns. And I will fill its mountains with the slain on your hills and in your valleys and all your ravines. Those who are slain by the sword shall fall." Verse 9, "I will make you perpetually desolate, and your cities shall be uninhabited. Then you shall know that I am the Lord, because you have said, These two nations and these two countries shall be mine, and we will possess them, although the Lord was there." Look at verse 12. "Then you shall know that I am the Lord. I have heard all your blasphemies, which you have spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, They are desolate. They are given to us to consume. Thus with your mouth you have boasted against me and multiplied your words against me. I have heard them. Thus says the Lord God, the whole earth will rejoice when I make you desolate." I believe that a lot of that is still yet future to come. And it is also because of what we read in the book of Obadiah. If you look at, there is only one chapter in Obadiah, and if you look at verses 1 through 14, that has been fulfilled. That is in the past. But when we come through verses 15 onward, it is speaking of that which is yet to come, because it is speaking about the day of the Lord, which begins to mark the 7-year tribulation period. And this is what we read in verse 15 in the book of Obadiah. For the day of the Lord upon all the nations is near. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your reprisal shall return upon your own head. For as you drank on my holy mountain," that's speaking of the Temple Mount, "so shall all the nations drink continually. Yes, they shall drink and swallow, and they shall be as though they had never been." Of course, that correlates also with Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3, where God says he's going to make Jerusalem this cup of trembling. In other words, the nations, the Palestinians, are going to be intoxicated with power over that little piece of land, that 35-acre piece in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. And it says that the nations will drink continually. You know, when Israel reunified the city after the Six-Day War in 1967, they have sovereignty over the Temple Mount. But Moshe Dayan made an agreement with the Palestinians in which he gave the custodianship to the Islamic Waqf of Jordan. And that is the Palestinians who control really what goes on up there. Now there's police presence from Israel up there. Don't get me wrong. Israel has a lot of say what goes on up there. But for the most part, it is the Palestinians who say what time you can go up there and what time you can't go up there. What you can bring up there, what you can't bring up there. What your dress code's going to be like and what you can't wear up there. And they are intoxicated with power. But it's coming a time where God's going to have his judgment based upon them for that reason. Now let's look over at Malachi and in chapter 1. And this is what we read in verse 4. "Even though Edom has said, 'We have been impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places,' thus says the Lord of hosts, 'They may build, but I will throw down. They shall be called the territory of wickedness.'" You know, when I was at one of the Palestinian encampments just a few weeks ago in Toronto, downtown Toronto, and you can see in the picture here, one of the posters that they had on the fence was, "We will return." And of course, their mantra is, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." That's from the Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. There is no Israel in that. And they believe they're going to return. They're going to overthrow Israel, and they will be the ones to occupy the land. And yet, what does God say here in the book of Malachi? That those that say they're going to return and build in those places, it will be the territory of wickedness. So you see, the spirit of the Edomites is alive and well in the modern day Palestinians today. And judgment's coming one day for all those that set their face towards Jerusalem and try to divide the city for the sake of peace, all the while ignoring what God has written through his prophets a long time ago. Judgment is coming one day. And so when I hear Christians having zero to no compassion for Israel and instead taking up the Palestinian cause, I wonder to myself, what Bible are they reading? Certainly it is not the one that I have, or maybe it is as Jesus said to Israel's leaders, "Have ye not read?" And if we haven't read, well, I think we better start reading, because we will all have to give an account one day. And as I've said it before, we as Bible-believing Christians better align ourselves with God's prophetic plan for Israel, which includes his regathering of his chosen people back to the land of Israel, not Palestine. And as this world continues to put pressure on Israel to make peace with those who wish them dead and create a Palestinian state with those who think October 7th was a good thing, we need to be standing, supporting, and showing Israel the love of Messiah Jesus and speak out against anti-Zionism every chance we get. That's what the command in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1 of comforting God's people looks like. And while we're doing that, let's continue to pray. To continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, which ultimately means to pray for the return of Israel's Messiah Jesus. But until that happens, we can be praying for Israel's leaders to be wise to the schemes of their enemies, and that world leaders would turn to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in their decision-making. And we could also be praying for the Palestinians to turn from their hatred before it's too late. And so, friends, with that, until next time, let's continue to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. So thanks for joining us on another episode of In News Surrounding Israel. God bless.